The pristine Aston Martin glided to a halt at the intersection as Nova City's skyscrapers cast long shadows across Prosperity Avenue. Inside, Thaddeus Blackwood's amber eyes narrowed at the peculiar sight on the corner. Twin girls with copper hair selling a porcelain carousel horse, a silver constellation necklace glinting at one child's throat. The same necklace he'd given his vanished wife 8 years ago, the same rare amber eyes as his own, staring back at him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The gleaming glass towers of Nova City reflected the setting sun as Thaddeus Blackwood's custom Aston Martin purred to a stop at the intersection of Prosperity Avenue and Fortune Street. The vehicle's sleek lines and midnight blue finish stood out even among the luxury cars that populated this upscale district. At 54, Thaddeus had built Blackwood Innovations from a garage startup into a tech empire valued at $30 billion. His silver-streaked dark hair and piercing amber eyes gave him a distinguished appearance that financial magazines frequently featured on their covers. Time had only enhanced his commanding presence, though the constant pressure of maintaining his empire had etched permanent lines around his eyes and mouth. Nova City acknowledged Thaddeus not merely as wealthy, but as royalty in the business world. He had revolutionized quantum computing and artificial intelligence integration, creating systems that had fundamentally altered how the world processed information. His name had become synonymous with innovation and ruthless efficiency. Mr. Blackwood, the board is expecting you in 20 minutes for the Horizon Project vote. His assistant's voice chimed through the car's speakers. The acquisition numbers just came in, and they're favorable. This could be your most significant expansion yet. I'm aware, Imogen, Thaddeus replied, his attention suddenly drawn to something unusual on the street corner. Two small girls, perhaps 8 years old, identical in every feature, stood behind a makeshift cardboard stand. Unlike the polished children of Nova City's elite, these twins wore mismatched clothes clearly sourced from donation bins. Their reddened hands clutched a single item between them, an antique porcelain carousel horse, meticulously detailed despite its obvious age. The miniature horse bore hand-painted details with gold leaf accents that hinted at its former value. A crudely written sign proclaimed, "Special toy for sale, need food for tonight." The incongruity of such obvious poverty existing in the shadows of Nova City's wealth was jarring enough, but something about their delicate features struck Thaddeus as hauntingly familiar. The distinctive shape of their eyes, the proud tilt of their chins despite their circumstances. Then one of the girls looked up, meeting his gaze through the car window. Thaddeus felt the world tilt beneath him. Those eyes, not just the shape, but the color, a rare amber identical to his own, a Blackwood trait that appeared in every generation. The same eyes that had looked back at him from Elara's face during their 5-year marriage. His mind raced backward, through time. 8 years since he'd thrown Elara out, 8 years since she'd tearfully insisted she was pregnant despite medical reports confirming his sterility. 8 years since he'd accused her of infidelity rather than believe that the specialists could have been wrong. 8 years of building his empire while forgetting the woman he had once loved. As if drawn by an invisible force, Thaddeus instructed his driver to pull over. "Wait here, Dominic. Cancel my meeting." "Sir, the board has been waiting weeks for this vote. The Horizon acquisition can wait." Thaddeus cut him off, already opening his door. The crisp autumn air carried the first hint of winter, but Thaddeus barely noticed as he approached the makeshift stand. Up close, he studied the girls more carefully. Their copper-colored hair, though tangled and in need of proper care, was exactly the shade Elara's had been. Their faces, heart-shaped like hers, with high cheekbones and delicate noses. But those eyes, those were undeniably Blackwood eyes. "How much for the carousel?" he asked, his normally commanding voice uncharacteristically gentle. The slightly taller twin answered immediately. $40, sir. It's very special. Our mother gave it to us. Arietta, be quiet, the other twin whispered urgently, nudging her sister. Remember what Aunt Zenobia said about talking to strangers? Thaddeus felt his heart stutter. Arietta, his grandmother's name, a family tradition he had once mentioned to Elara during late-night conversations about children they might someday have. They had agreed their daughter would carry the name if they ever had a girl, and now here was a child with that very name, with his eyes selling a precious toy for food. "And you?" he asked the quieter twin. "What's your name?" The girl regarded him suspiciously, pulling her worn jacket tighter. "Lyra," she finally answered, her voice barely audible. "Lyra, the constellation." Elara had been an amateur astronomer, spending countless nights on their penthouse terrace mapping stars. Her fascination with celestial bodies had been one of the qualities that had drawn him to her. Her ability to dream beyond the tangible world of technology and profit margins. As the second twin moved protectively in front of the carousel horse, something glinted at her neck, a flash of silver partially hidden beneath her threadbare scarf. "That necklace," Thaddeus said, his voice barely audible. "May I see it?" The girls exchanged wary glances, but something in Thaddeus's expression must have reassured them. Lyra reluctantly pulled a silver pendant from beneath her collar. Thaddeus stared at the distinctive pendant, a constellation design with a small amber stone at its center. The Blackwood family heirloom he had given Elara on their first anniversary. A piece his mother had insisted would only go to the woman who would bear the next generation of Blackwoods. "Where did you get this?" he asked, unable to mask the tremor in his voice. "It was our mother's," Arietta answered plainly. "She said it would protect us when she couldn't anymore." Thaddeus felt his knees weaken. "And your mother," he managed. "Where is she now?" The girl's expressions darkened simultaneously. Lyra's small hand closed protectively around the pendant. "She's at Obsidian Heights," Arietta said, her voice dropping. "The place where they lock people up." Thaddeus knew the facility well. Obsidian Heights Correctional Center, Nova City's maximum security prison, notorious for its harsh conditions. The thought of Elara there sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the autumn wind. "We're saving to visit her," Lyra added with quiet determination. "But we need food first. Aunt Zenobia's medicine took all the money this week." The carousel horse suddenly took on new significance as Thaddeus recognized it, an antique piece from his own childhood collection. He had given it to Elara when she'd mentioned starting a family, a symbolic gesture of the heritage they would pass down together. "I'd like to buy this," he said, reaching for his wallet, "but $40 seems too little for something so special." He pulled out $500 bills, holding them toward the girls. Their eyes widened in perfect synchronization. "That's too much," Lyra said cautiously, suspicion evident in her amber gaze. "We're not supposed to take charity." "It's not charity," Thaddeus replied, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This carousel is worth every penny." As the girls hesitated, Thaddeus's phone chimed insistently. Imogen was calling again, undoubtedly to inform him that the board was waiting. For the first time in his career, the billion-dollar decisions of Blackwood Innovations seemed utterly inconsequential. "Please," he added, "where do you live? I'd like to speak with your aunt." The twins exchanged another silent communication before Arietta finally answered. "Duskfall District, Crescent Moon Apartments, Unit 12B, but Aunt Zenobia doesn't like visitors." Thaddeus knew the area, a struggling neighborhood that had resisted the city's gentrification efforts, populated by those the booming economy had left behind. The very people his tax breaks and zoning approvals had inadvertently displaced. He handed them the money, which Lyra carefully folded and tucked into a small pouch hidden beneath her jacket. With equal care, Arietta wrapped the carousel horse in a faded cloth and presented it to him. "Our mother said it's magical," she told him solemnly. "If it goes back where it belongs, wishes come true." Thaddeus accepted the bundle, his fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you for telling me that. I think perhaps it does belong with me." As he walked back to his car, carousel in hand, Thaddeus felt the weight of 8 years of certainty crumbling beneath him. If these girls were his daughters, and his heart already knew they were, then everything he had believed, every cold decision he had made since Elara left, required re-examination. "Dominic," he instructed his driver, "take me to the office. Then I want you to find out everything you can about an Elara Blackwood at Obsidian Heights Correctional Center." "Sir?" Dominic's confusion was evident in the rearview mirror. "My ex-wife," Thaddeus clarified, staring at the wrapped carousel, "the mother of my children." Back in his penthouse that evening, Thaddeus placed the carousel horse on his obsidian desk, the antique porcelain starkly beautiful against the modern minimalism of his office. The city sprawled beneath him, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. But for once, the view failed to inspire the usual satisfaction. Dominic's investigation had confirmed what Thaddeus had feared. Elara Blackwood, his ex-wife, was indeed incarcerated at Obsidian Heights, serving a 3-year sentence for embezzlement from Halcyon Pharmaceuticals, where she had worked as an accountant after their divorce. The case details painted a damning picture. Unauthorized transfers to personal accounts, falsified records. Yet something about the timeline nagged at him. Thaddeus opened his secure safe and withdrew a leather-bound box he hadn't touched in years. Inside lay the remnants of his life with Elara. Photographs, letters, small mementos of a happiness he'd convinced himself was fraudulent. Their wedding photo struck him first. Elara, radiant in ivory, her copper hair cascading in waves, amber eyes bright with happiness. Beside her, a younger Thaddeus smiled with genuine joy, an expression that had become foreign to his face. He had loved her completely once, before ambition and legacy had consumed him, before his sister Octavia had voiced her suspicions about Elara's true intentions, before medical reports had given him the excuse he needed to protect himself from vulnerability. Thaddeus recalled their final argument with painful clarity. Elara, standing in this very penthouse, hands protectively cradling her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face. "It's a miracle, Thaddeus," she had insisted. "The doctors were wrong. These are our children." His response had been cold, calculated. "Every specialist confirmed I cannot father children, so whose miracle are you carrying, Elara?" The hurt in her eyes had been unbearable, but his pride wouldn't allow him to see reason. The Blackwood name meant everything. Generations of brilliance and innovation. The thought of another man's children bearing that name was unacceptable. His phone had rung during their argument, Octavia with urgent news about a potential investor. Thaddeus remembered how Elara's expression had hardened at the interruption. "Your sister always comes between us," Elara had said quietly. "She's never wanted this marriage to work." "Don't blame Octavia for your indiscretion," he'd snapped. The next morning, Elara was gone, leaving her wedding ring on the bedside table. No note, no explanations, just absence. Octavia had reinforced his belief in the following weeks, subtly at first, then more explicitly. She was only after the Blackwood fortune, his sister had insisted. "I warned you from the beginning." Now, with the image of twin girls, with his eyes and Elara's copper hair burned into his mind, Thaddeus questioned everything he had accepted as truth. He lifted his secure phone and called Mercer. his head of security. "I need you to investigate someone," Thaddeus said without preamble. "Zenobia, last name unknown, residing in Duskfall District, Crescent Moon Apartments, Unit A12B. She has custody of twin girls, approximately 8 years old, and I need the complete case file on Elara Blackwood's embezzlement conviction, not the public record, everything." After hanging up, Thaddeus turned the carousel horse in his hands, noting the delicate craftsmanship he had once admired as a child. His mother had told him it represented the Blackwood legacy, beautiful, valuable, and continuing in circles through generations. Circles that Thaddeus had believed would end with him. He poured himself a glass of scotch and walked to the floor-to-ceiling. Windows, Nova City stretched before him, an empire of light and shadow that mirrored his own internal landscape. Somewhere in that urban expanse, 2 little girls with his eyes were eating dinner purchased with his money, unaware that their father stood watching the same night sky. Tomorrow, he would find answers. Tomorrow, he would begin to understand what had really happened 8 years ago. Tomorrow, he would determine if he had made the greatest mistake of his life. The next morning found Thaddeus in Duskfall District, a neighborhood that seemed to exist in perpetual twilight despite the bright autumn sun. Crescent Moon Apartments rose like a decaying monolith, its once white facade stained by decades of pollution and neglect. Dressed in inconspicuous clothing, jeans and a nondescript jacket rather than his usual tailored suits, Thaddeus approached Unit 12B with uncharacteristic hesitation. Mercer's preliminary report had revealed little about Zenobia Nightshade. Beyond her occupation as a former astronomy professor, now working night shifts at the Nova Observatory gift shop while battling chronic illness. The connection to Elara was clear in retrospect. They had met at university, where Elara had taken astronomy classes. Zenobia had been her mentor and friend, the only person Elara had maintained contact with after moving to Nova City and marrying Thaddeus. His knock was answered by a thin woman with silver-streaked black hair, pulled into a severe bun. Despite her obvious frailty, Zenobia Nightshade's dark eyes assessed him with sharp intelligence. "I wondered how long it would take you," she said, without preamble, her voice surprisingly strong. 8 years seemed excessive, even for a man of your legendary stubbornness. "You know who I am," Thaddeus stated, unsurprised. "Those eyes are distinctive, and besides, your face appears regularly enough in business publications." She stepped aside. "You'd better come in before the neighbors start gossiping." The apartment was small but meticulously organized, with bookshelves dominating every wall. Astronomy texts shared space with children's books. Star charts and the twins' drawings covered available wall space. Despite obvious financial constraints, there was warmth here, a home rather than merely a dwelling. "The girls are at school," Zenobia said, answering his unspoken question as she lowered herself carefully into a worn armchair. "Their education is the one area where I refuse to compromise, despite the cost." Thaddeus remained standing, suddenly uncertain in this unfamiliar territory. "I need to understand what happened. With Elara, with the girls, with the truth you refuse to accept," Zenobia finished sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Blackwood. This conversation requires more civility than you showed my friend 8 years ago." Properly chastised, Thaddeus took a seat on the threadbare sofa. "Elara came to me after you threw her out," Zenobia began, her tone matter-of-fact. "Pregnant, heartbroken, and without resources. You'd frozen her accounts, cancelled her cards, even taken her car. Your sister's work, I suspect, though the order undoubtedly came from you." Thaddeus frowned. He had instructed Octavia to handle the dissolution of their shared assets, but the comprehensive nature of Elara's disinheritance exceeded his intentions. "She stayed with me through the pregnancy," Zenobia continued. Worked remote data entry jobs until the twins were born. Arietta and Lyra, named after your grandmother and Elara's favorite constellation. She wanted them to maintain connections to both sides of their heritage, even if you refused to acknowledge them. Why didn't she fight the divorce? Thaddeus. Us challenge the settlement? She was entitled to significantly more. Zenobia's laugh held no humor. With what resources? Against your battalion of attorneys? Besides, Elara had her pride. She wanted nothing from a man who had called her faithless without evidence. The indictment stung because it contained truth. The medical reports were wrong, Zenobia interrupted, or deliberately falsified. Have you never questioned why 3 separate specialists delivered identical conclusions? Statistically improbable, wouldn't you say? The implication sent a chill through Thaddeus. You're suggesting interference. I'm suggesting your sister has always controlled access to your life, including your medical information. Zenobia shifted, wincing slightly. Elara suspected as much, but had no way to prove it. Octavia had indeed coordinated his medical care during that period, insisting on specialists who understood the unique pressures of his position. The possibility that she might have deliberately misled him about his fertility was both horrifying and, he was beginning to realize, entirely plausible. What about the embezzlement conviction? Thaddeus asked, changing direction. The evidence seemed definitive. Zenobia's expression darkened. Another statistical improbability. Elara was meticulous with finances. After you, she rebuilt her life carefully, earned her accounting certification, secured a good position at Halcyon, maintained a modest apartment for the family. Then suddenly, funds go missing, trail directly to her personal accounts, and digital fingerprints lead exclusively to her credentials. You're suggesting she was framed. I'm stating it outright. Zenobia leaned forward. The timing is what you should question. The embezzlement began exactly 1 month after Elara filed paperwork to establish paternity and seek minimal child support. Not a fortune, just enough to ensure the girls had health care. Thaddeus felt the floor shift beneath him for the second time in 24 hours. I never received any paternity claim. Of course not. It disappeared from court records within days of filing, just as the letters she sent during her pregnancy returned unopened, just as her calls to your office were blocked. Zenobia's gaze was unflinching. Your sister has been very thorough in maintaining your isolation from your family. The accusations aligned too perfectly with Mercer's overnight findings to dismiss. Octavia had indeed intercepted communications from Elara over the years, including certified letters sent to both his home and office. His sister had also made substantial donations to the judge who sentenced Elara, followed by a suspicious series of account transfers involving Halcyon's security chief. Why come forward now? Thaddeus asked. Why sell the carousel yesterday? Zenobia's composure finally cracked. Because I'm dying, Mr. Blackwood. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Treatment has consumed our savings. And while I've tried to shield the girls from the worst of it, reality has become unavoidable. Without Elara, without me. She left the sentence unfinished. The girls will have no one, Thaddeus completed. The thought, the full weight of the situation settling on him. They have a father, Zenobia corrected, if he chooses to acknowledge them. Thaddeus stood abruptly, decades of decisive action reasserting themselves through shock and guilt. I need to see Elara. Visiting hours at Obsidian Heights are Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 dry to 3 zay, immediate family only. Zenobia's tone suggested she doubted his commitment. I'll be there tomorrow, Thaddeus stated firmly, and I'll need your help with something else. For the first time, a hint of hope flickered across Zenobia's stern features. What did you have in mind? A DNA test, Thaddeus answered. Not because I doubt they're mine, but because we'll need official confirmation to fight what's coming next. Zenobia nodded, understanding immediately. Your sister won't relinquish control easily. No, Thaddeus agreed grimly. But neither will I. Not anymore. As he left the apartment, the carousel horse's words echoed in his mind. If it goes, back where it belongs, wishes come true. The toy had indeed returned home, and with it, the truth he had refused to see for 8 long years. Obsidian Heights Correctional Center lived up to its name, a dark monolith rising against the skyline like a scar on Nova City's polished veneer. Thaddeus had driven past it countless times without a second thought. Now, as he approached the imposing security gate, each step felt weighted with the consequences of choices made 8 years ago. The visitor processing was deliberately humiliating: surrender of personal effects, body scan, identification verification, and finally, an escort through a series of mechanized doors that sealed behind him with ominous finality. Thaddeus Blackwood, accustomed to opening doors with his mere presence, found himself utterly powerless in this environment. Name of inmate? The bored guard asked, not bothering to look up from his terminal. Elara Blackwood, Thaddeus replied, still unsettled by speaking the name aloud after so many years of silence. The guard's eyes flicked up briefly. Relation? Ex-husband, Thaddeus answered, the inadequacy of the term striking him anew. After another series of security checks, Thaddeus was directed to a sterile visitation room divided by transparent partitions. The space buzzed with the subdued conversations of families maintaining tenuous connections through institutional barriers. Children pressed small hands against the dividers. Mothers blinked back tears. Spouses leaned forward as if physical proximity might somehow bridge the separation. Thaddeus took his assigned seat, pulse hammering in his throat. 5 minutes passed, before a door opened on the opposite side and Elara entered. The sight of her after 8 years struck him physically. Prison had not been kind to Elara Blackwood. Her once vibrant copper hair was dull, pulled back severely in a practical knot that emphasized the new sharpness of her cheekbones. The standard-issue gray uniform hung on her slender frame, making her appear smaller than he remembered. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, though the amber irises themselves remained as brilliant and distinctive as their daughters. When Elara spotted him, she froze mid-step, clearly unprepared for this particular visitor. For a moment, Thaddeus thought she might turn and leave. Instead, with visible effort, she composed herself and approached the partition. They stared at each other. Through the barrier, neither immediately reaching for the communication handset. 8 years of silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and explanations. Finally, Elara picked up her receiver. Thaddeus mirrored the action. 8 years, she said simply, her voice huskier than he remembered, containing none of the warmth that had once characterized it. What could possibly bring Thaddeus Blackwood to Obsidian Heights? The bitterness in her tone was justified, yet carefully controlled, a testament to her innate dignity even in these circumstances. I saw them, he replied, the words inadequate for the magnitude of his discovery. Arietta and Lyra, selling, a carousel horse on Prosperity Avenue. Elara's composure wavered slightly, maternal concern briefly overriding her guarded expression. Are they all right? They're fine, Thaddeus assured her quickly, resourceful, determined. He hesitated. Beautiful. Like their mother, Elara finished automatically, then seemed to catch herself, the momentary softness evaporating. Is that recognition in your voice, Thaddeus? After 8 years of denial? I never received your letters, Elara. Thaddeus leaned forward. Any of them. Not from the hospital, not the legal notices, nothing. Skepticism flashed across her face. I sent dozens over years, all returned or ignored. Filed court documents that mysteriously disappeared, made phone calls that never reached you. Octavia, Thaddeus said, the single name and explanation hanging between them. Understanding dawned in Elara's eyes. I suspected as much. Your sister made her feelings about me quite clear from the beginning. I was never worthy of the illustrious Blackwood name. I have the DNA test results, Thaddeus continued, pressing forward despite the weight of her justified suspicion. Though I didn't need scientific confirmation to see the truth. They have my eyes, my expressions. Your stubbornness, Elara added with a ghost of a smile that vanished almost immediately. Why are you here, Thaddeus? What do you want? The question was reasonable. What did he want? Forgiveness seemed too much to ask. Understanding, perhaps. A chance to undo damage that seemed increasingly irreparable. To make amends, if possible, he finally said. To understand what really happened. Elara studied him through the plexiglass, years of hardship having taught her to be wary of sudden interest. My attorney is working to secure your release. Thaddeus continued when she remained silent. The sentencing was suspicious. We believe there was interference. Elara's laugh held no humor. I wondered why the judge was so unmoved by character witnesses and my clean record. First-time offender, twin daughters, evidence that was circumstantial at best. Yet I received the maximum sentence. Did you embezzle from Halcyon? Thaddeus asked directly. Her eyes flashed dangerously. What do you think? I think you're incapable of it, he answered honestly. But I need to hear it from you. No, Elara said firmly. I did not steal from my employer. I would never jeopardize my ability to provide for our daughters. She leaned closer to the partition. Someone accessed the financial systems using my credentials, transferred exactly enough money to trigger criminal charges rather than administrative discipline, and left an evidence trail so perfect it might as well have had my signature. It began after you filed for paternity testing, Thaddeus stated rather than asked. Elara's surprise was evident. Zenobia told you. Yesterday, after I saw the constellation necklace around Lyra's neck. His voice softened. You kept it all these years. It wasn't mine to discard, Elara replied. It belongs to the Blackwood lineage. I always intended the girls to have their birthright, even if their father rejected them. The statement struck Thaddeus deeply. Even after his callous dismissal, Elara had maintained connections to his family heritage for their daughters. Do you know why my conviction happened so quickly, with such an excessive sentence? Elara asked suddenly. The judge moved the case ahead of dozens of others. The prosecutor rejected plea deals that the district attorney had approved. My court-appointed attorney mysteriously received an offer to join a prestigious firm midway through preparations, leaving me with an inexperienced replacement. The systematic manipulation was familiar to Thaddeus. The same efficient elimination of obstacles that characterized Octavia's business strategies. I'm having everything re-evaluated, he assured her. My legal team is investigating the judge, the prosecutor, and the circumstances of your arrest. Your sister's reach is substantial, Elara warned. She's had 8 years to cover her tracks. Not well enough, Thaddeus replied grimly. Zenobia kept copies of everything, and Octavia doesn't know I'm aware of her interference yet. Elara's expression remained guarded. The twins visit on Thursdays with Zenobia. I would prefer they not see you here until we determine how to proceed. The request was reasonable, yet it stung. And how do you suggest we proceed? Elara, after I secure your release. That's presumptuous, she noted, though without rancor. You can't simply appear in their lives and disappear again when your guilt is assuaged or your curiosity satisfied. I want to be their father, Thaddeus said firmly. Not from a distance, not through financial support alone. I want to know them, help raise them, be present for all the moments I've already missed. Elara studied him, searching for signs of insincerity. And if I refuse? If I decide your sudden paternal interest comes too late? The question terrified him, but Thaddeus answered honestly. Then I would respect your decision, continue providing for them anonymously, and hope someday you might reconsider. His answer seemed to surprise her. The Thaddeus she had known would have leveraged his wealth and influence to get what he wanted regardless of others' wishes. You've changed, she observed. Seeing them changed me, Thaddeus replied simply. Even in those few moments on the street corner, something fundamental shifted. Elara was quiet for a long moment. Zenobia is dying, she finally said, her voice catching slightly. The cancer has spread despite treatments. Without her, without me, the girls have no one. They have me, Thaddeus corrected gently, a father they've never known. But their father nonetheless. The guard announced 5 minutes remaining. Elara straightened, decision apparently made. If you're sincere about being in their lives permanently, then yes, you can tell them who you are. But Thaddeus, her voice hardened, if you hurt them, if you make promises you don't keep, there will be no forgiveness, not ever. Understood, Thaddeus nodded, relief and apprehension mingling equally. I'm getting you out of here, Elara, soon. As they prepared to end the visit, Elara added one final thought. Be careful with Octavia. She's had 8 years to perfect her version of reality. She won't relinquish control easily. The warning echoed Thaddeus's own concerns. As he walked from the prison, his resolve crystallized. Octavia's manipulation had cost him 8 years with his daughters and Elara's freedom. It had nearly destroyed 2 innocent lives. The time for family loyalty at any cost had ended. Back in his penthouse office, Thaddeus reviewed Mercer's latest findings with growing dismay. His security chief had compiled a disturbing pattern of interference dating back to the earliest days of his relationship with Elara. Your sister established surveillance of Ms. Blackwood 6 months before your engagement, Mercer explained, displaying digital evidence on Thaddeus's holographic projector. She accessed Ms. Blackwood's financial records, medical history, communications, all through shell companies to maintain deniability. And the fertility reports? Thaddeus asked, already suspecting the answer. Tampered with, Mercer confirmed. We've located the original lab technician who performed your tests. She confirmed your condition indicated significantly reduced fertility, but not sterility. The final reports that reached you were altered. Thaddeus absorbed this with grim acceptance. And Elara's embezzlement case? Mercer's expression darkened. Manufactured. We've identified transfers from Octavia's personal accounts to Halcyon's security chief through 3 intermediaries. The timing aligns perfectly with Ms. Blackwood's paternity filing. The methodical destruction of Elara's life and reputation struck Thaddeus with physical force. His sister had orchestrated the complete dismantling of a woman whose only crime had been loving him and bearing his children. She's expected back from Tokyo tomorrow, Mercer added. Would you like me to continue monitoring her communications discreetly? No, Thaddeus decided. It's time for direct confrontation. Schedule a meeting at my office tomorrow afternoon. Tell her it's about the Horizon acquisition. After Mercer departed, Thaddeus turned to his secure terminal and began drafting a series of legal documents. By morning, he had initiated proceedings to remove Octavia from Blackwood Innovations board and leadership structure. He had transferred significant personal assets into newly established trusts for Arietta and Lyra. He had documented evidence of Octavia's systematic sabotage of both his family and several company initiatives that had threatened her influence. Most importantly, He had begun legal proceedings to challenge Elara's conviction based on evidence tampering and judicial misconduct. Alexandra Hemsworth, Nova City's most formidable defense attorney, had assured him that with the evidence they'd gathered, Elara could be released within weeks, pending a new trial that would likely never occur once the district attorney reviewed the misconduct evidence. At precisely 3 p.m. the following day, Octavia Blackwood swept into Thaddeus's office with characteristic authority. At 48, she remained striking. Her silver-streaked black hair elegantly styled, her amber, Blackwood eyes sharp with intelligence, her tailored suit projecting effortless power. "Tokyo was productive," she announced without preamble. "The Nakamura Group is eager to finalize terms before the quarter ends." She settled into a chair opposite his desk, studying him with sudden scrutiny. "You seem distracted." "The horizon. Vote went well in my absence, I presume." "I postponed it," Thaddeus replied evenly, watching his sister's reaction. Octavia's momentary surprise quickly shifted to irritation. "That's unlike you, Thaddeus. We've been preparing this acquisition for months. What could possibly take precedence?" "Family matters," he answered, his tone deliberately ambiguous. His sister's expression didn't change, but he noted the slight tensing of her shoulders, a subtle tell he'd observed throughout their lives whenever she felt threatened. "I wasn't aware of any family emergencies," she said carefully. "Is there something I should know?" "Indeed there is." Thaddeus removed the DNA test results from his desk drawer, sliding them across to her. "I recently discovered I'm a father to twin 8-year-old girls." Octavia barely glanced at the document, her composure unwavering. "A paternity claim? How predictable. Some woman clearly learned of your worth and manufactured convincing-looking evidence." She pushed the paper aside, dismissively. "I'll have our legal team handle it discreetly." "The mother is Elara," Thaddeus continued, watching his sister closely. "My ex-wife, the woman who told me she was pregnant 8 years ago only to be accused of infidelity and thrown out." Octavia's expression hardened. "Elara was manipulative from the beginning. I warned you about her intentions toward the Blackwood fortune. This is merely her latest attempt to access what she couldn't gain through marriage." Curious, then, that she never sought financial support until 8 years later, when her friend's medical bills became overwhelming. Thaddeus leaned forward, even more curious that her claims were accompanied by documentation showing my fertility reports were falsified, reports you personally helped arrange. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Octavia's face. "Medical science isn't infallible. If she did somehow conceive during your marriage, that doesn't negate her subsequent behavior. Her subsequent behavior includes raising my daughters in near poverty while building a legitimate career," Thaddeus interrupted, "until someone framed her for embezzlement immediately after she filed for paternity confirmation." Octavia stood abruptly. "You're being manipulated again, just as you were during your marriage. Whatever evidence you believe you've found has clearly been manufactured to—" "Stop!" Thaddeus's voice carried the quiet authority that had built an empire. "I've seen them, Octavia. Arietta and Lyra, 8-year-old identical twins with Blackwood eyes and their mother's copper hair. I've spoken with Elara in prison, where she's serving time for a crime she didn't commit. I've retrieved the carousel horse I gave her when we discussed starting a family." He activated his office view screen, displaying security footage of the twins at their makeshift stand, the constellation necklace clearly visible around Lyra's neck. "That pendant contains the amber stone that's been in our family for generations. The one mother insisted would only go to the woman who would bear the next generation of Blackwoods." Octavia stared at the image, her practiced composure finally cracking. "You don't understand what you're doing. she said, her voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "These children, they'll destroy everything we've built. They're not worthy of the Blackwood legacy." "Not worthy," Thaddeus repeated incredulously. "They're selling their only treasured possession to buy food while their mother sits in prison and their guardian dies of cancer. Yet they maintain their dignity, their determination, their resolve to help each other. They embody what the Blackwood name should represent far better than either of us." His sister's expression shifted from uncertainty to cold calculation. "You've always been susceptible to emotional manipulation, Thaddeus. It's why I've had to protect you throughout your career. This sentimentality is precisely what Elara exploited during your marriage. You've never protected me," Thaddeus realized with sudden clarity. "You've controlled me, isolated me, eliminated anyone who threatened your influence." Octavia's laugh held no warmth. "And transformed you from a lovesick academic into one of the most powerful men in the world. Blackwood Innovations exists because I removed distractions and forced you to focus on what matters." "At what cost?" Thaddeus demanded. 8 years without my children? Elara imprisoned on fabricated charges. 2 innocent girls raised in hardship. "Acceptable collateral damage," Octavia stated coldly. "The Blackwood legacy transcends individual happiness." The casual cruelty of her response struck Thaddeus physically. This woman, his sister, his closest advisor, his supposed protector, viewed his family as expendable obstacles to her version of success. "Your participation in Blackwood Innovations ends today," Thaddeus informed her, his voice level despite his internal turmoil. "Your board position, your executive role, your influence in company decisions, all terminated effective immediately." Octavia's expression shifted from shock to contempt. "You can't remove me. I hold 20% of controlling shares. I've structured key partnerships that would collapse without my oversight. Partnerships that, upon investigation, reveal systematic kickbacks to your personal accounts," Thaddeus countered. "Financial arrangements that constitute corporate fraud. Evidence I've documented and prepared for authorities should you choose to fight your removal." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Octavia's face. "You wouldn't dare. I'm your sister, your blood." "So are Arietta and Lyra," Thaddeus replied calmly, "and unlike you, they've done nothing to deserve punishment." He activated his desk console. "Security will escort you from the building. Your access to all Blackwood systems and properties has been revoked. Personal items from your office will be delivered to your residence." "You're making a catastrophic mistake," Octavia hissed, desperation edging into her voice. "Without me, you'll lose everything we've built." "No," Thaddeus corrected her. "I'm preventing the catastrophic mistake of continuing to sacrifice my family on the altar of corporate success." He met her gaze directly. "I've also submitted evidence of your interference in Elara's case to the district attorney. You have 24 hours to leave Nova City before they act on it." Octavia's face contorted with fury. "You'll regret choosing them over me." "No!" Thaddeus said with absolute certainty. "This is the first choice in 8 years I won't regret." After security led a still protesting Octavia from his office, Thaddeus stood at his panoramic window, watching Nova City's skyline as afternoon faded into evening. The Blackwood Tower cast a long shadow across the financial district, a physical manifestation of the influence he had prioritized over human connection for too long. His secure phone chimed. Alexandra Hemsworth calling with an update on Elara's case. "The district attorney was appropriately horrified by our evidence," the attorney reported without preamble, "particularly the financial links between your sister and Judge Kendrick. They've agreed to expedite release proceedings pending a formal hearing tomorrow morning." Relief washed through Thaddeus. How soon could she come home? Assuming the judge approves, and he will given the circumstances, she could be processed out by tomorrow afternoon. After ending the call, Thaddeus contacted Zenobia, who had agreed to help him prepare the twins for the truth about their parentage. The conversation would be held at their apartment that evening, followed by the news of their mother's imminent release. "Are you certain you're ready for this?" Zenobia asked, her voice carrying both hope and caution. "Once you tell them, there's no going back." "I've wasted 8 years," Thaddeus replied. "I don't intend to waste another day." Dusk had settled over Nova City by the time Thaddeus arrived at Crescent Moon Apartments. The glowing windows of Unit 12B seemed to beckon him toward a future he'd never anticipated, but now couldn't imagine living without. The twins greeted him with surprised recognition when Zenobia opened the door. They sat at a small kitchen table completing homework, their copper heads bent over notebooks, matching amber eyes widening at his unexpected appearance. "Mr. Blackwood brought something important to discuss with you," Zenobia explained, her stern demeanor softened by the gravity of the moment. Thaddeus placed the carousel horse on the table between them, alongside an old photograph of himself and Elara on their wedding day. "Do you recognize these?" he asked gently. Arietta reached for the carousel first. "This is our special horse. We sold it to you. And this," Lyra added, touching the photograph with careful fingers, "is our mother when she was happy. Before." The simple assessment of Elara's documented joy versus her current circumstances tightened Thaddeus's throat. "Do you know who's with her in this picture?" The twins studied the image. "That's her husband," Arietta answered matter-of-factly, "the one who didn't believe we could be his." The directness of children never ceased to humble Thaddeus. "That's right," he confirmed softly. "That's me. I'm your father." Silence fell across the small apartment. Lyra's hand unconsciously moved to the constellation pendant at her neck, while Arietta's expression shifted from surprise to assessment. "Mom said you have buildings with your name on them," Arietta finally offered, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes," Thaddeus acknowledged, "very tall ones." "She told us we have your eyes," Lyra added quietly. "You do," Thaddeus agreed, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "The same color that Blackwoods have had for generations." Emma, analytical as always, asked the crucial question. "Why didn't you want us before?" The direct inquiry deserved absolute honesty. "Because I was told I couldn't have children," Thaddeus explained carefully. "And I believed that lie instead of trusting your mother. It was the worst mistake of my life." "Did you make Mum go to prison?" Arietta asked, her protective instinct evident. "No," Thaddeus assured them firmly. "In fact, I've been working to bring her home, and I have good news about that." He glanced at Zenobia, who nodded encouragement. "Your mother should be released tomorrow." The twins' reaction was instantaneous, gasps followed by tears of joy and disbelieving questions. Thaddeus explained the situation in simplified terms they could understand. Evidence showing their mother had been wrongfully accused, important people acknowledging the mistake, arrangements for her immediate release. "Where will we live?" Lyra asked pragmatically after the initial excitement subsided. "Aunt Zenobia says we probably can't stay here much longer." Thaddeus had anticipated this concern. "I've found a nice apartment not far from here," he explained. "Large enough for all of you, close to your current school so you won't have to change in the middle of the year. Your mother will make the final decision, of course." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, a phenomenon Thaddeus was beginning to recognize, the subtle shift of expression that conveyed entire conversations without words. "Can we still sell flowers?" Arietta asked, unexpectedly. The question caught Thaddeus off guard. "You want to continue selling flowers?" Arietta nodded seriously. "We're saving for bigger things now. Mum needs good clothes for job interviews. And Aunt Zenobia needs special medicine that insurance doesn't pay for. Their unfailing consideration for others, despite their own needs, struck Thaddeus deeply. These children, his children, had developed a moral compass far superior to his, and despite their challenging circumstances. "You can absolutely continue selling flowers if that's what you want," he assured them. "Though perhaps we can find better locations and supplies. And regarding Aunt Zenobia's medicine..." He glanced at the older woman, who watched the interaction with guarded hope. "I've arranged for her to see specialists at Nova Medical Institute. Tomorrow, they have treatments not available through standard insurance." Zenobia began to object, but Thaddeus raised a hand. "Consider it 8 years of overdue childcare payments, the least I can do for the woman who has raised my daughters when I failed to." The conversation continued into the evening, the twins gradually warming to Thaddeus with each passing hour. They showed him their schoolwork, their modest collection of books, the star charts Elara had helped them create during prison visits. Each small revelation of their personalities, their resilience, their determination to care for those around them, deepened Thaddeus's resolve to be worthy of calling himself their father. Late that night, as he prepared to leave with promises to return the following day for Elara's release, Lyra approached him hesitantly. "Mum keeps your picture," she said quietly, "in her special box. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping." The simple statement carried profound implications about Elara's ability to separate her justified anger toward him from their daughter's right to know their heritage. "Thank you for telling me that," Thaddeus replied, emotion thickening his voice. Arietta joined her sister, studying him with that direct Blackwood gaze that seemed to peer into souls. "Are you staying this time? For real?" "For real," Thaddeus confirmed, kneeling to meet them at eye level. "For as long as you and your mother will have me..." Unexpectedly, Arietta extended her hand in a formal gesture that brought a smile to Thaddeus's face. "Then it's nice to finally meet you, Father." The title, offered with such solemn dignity from his 8-year-old daughter, struck Thaddeus with its weight and responsibility. As he accepted her handshake, Lyra stepped forward and did something even more surprising. She hugged him quickly before retreating to her sister's side. On the drive back to his penthouse, Thaddeus found himself staring at the city with new eyes. Nova City had always represented conquest to him, territory claimed through business acumen and technological innovation. Now it appeared as the landscape of his daughter's future, a world he was suddenly desperate to improve, not for profit or legacy, but for their happiness and security. His phone chimed with updates from Mercer regarding Octavia's activities. She had withdrawn substantial funds from her personal accounts, ordered her household staff to pack essential items, and booked a private flight departing at dawn. She was running exactly as Thaddeus had anticipated. Let her go, he decided. Justice for Elara and security for the twins mattered more than vengeance against his sister. Octavia would live with the consequences of her actions, exile from the world she had manipulated so ruthlessly, separation from the family wealth she had prioritized above all else. As Thaddeus entered his penthouse, the emptiness of the space struck him physically. Despite its luxury, the enormous apartment contained no evidence of human connection, no photographs, no personal mementos, nothing that couldn't be replaced. With sufficient funds, he had built a monument to success rather than a home. That would change, he resolved, beginning tomorrow. Tomorrow, when Elara walked free. Tomorrow, when the rebuilding of what Octavia had destroyed could truly begin. Tomorrow, when the hard work of becoming worthy of his daughter's trust would commence in earnest. Thaddeus placed the carousel horse on his bedside table, its delicate craftsmanship a reminder of both past mistakes and future possibilities. If it goes back where it belongs, wishes come true, Arietta had said when selling it to him. The carousel had indeed returned home, and with it, the truth he had refused to see for 8 long years. Morning light streamed through the windows of Obsidian Heights Release Processing Center, transforming the normally oppressive space into something almost hopeful. Thaddeus had arrived an hour early, accompanied by Alexandra Hemsworth, whose formidable reputation had cleared administrative hurdles with remarkable efficiency. "The paperwork is complete," Alexandra confirmed, returning from a consultation with prison officials. Judge Forrester was appropriately horrified by the evidence of judicial misconduct. The warden has expedited processing, so Elara should be out within the hour. Thaddeus nodded, his attention focused on the small bag of clothing he'd purchased for Elara's release. Simple, dignified attire to replace the prison uniform she'd worn for months. The selection had felt strangely intimate, requiring consideration of a woman he had once known completely, but was now essentially a stranger. "Are the girls and Zenobia waiting at the apartment?" Alexandra asked, sensing his preoccupation. "Yes," Thaddeus confirmed. "I thought Elara might prefer privacy for this transition, rather than cameras and crowds." The decision to keep their reunion private had been deliberate. Despite his influence, Thaddeus had arranged no press coverage, no public statements, nothing that might transform his family's personal journey into fodder for Nova City's insatiable gossip networks. A door opened at the far end of the waiting room. Elara emerged, still wearing her grey prison uniform, but carrying herself with the quiet dignity that had characterized her even during their confrontational visit. When she spotted Thaddeus, her expression remained guarded, though the tension in her shoulders eased slightly at the absence of media or officials. Alexandra approached her first, introducing herself and briefly explaining the legal status of her release. Unconditional, with all charges dismissed and record expunged pending final paperwork. The attorney then discreetly retreated, allowing Thaddeus and Elara their first moment of genuine privacy in 8 years. "I brought clothes," Thaddeus said simply, offering the bag. "If you'd prefer something else, we can stop anywhere you like." "Ma'am," Elara accepted the package, her fingers brushing his momentarily. The contact, brief and incidental, nonetheless carried electrical awareness of all that existed between them. History, betrayal, lingering connection, and their shared children. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady, "for this and for expediting my release. The girls are waiting at the new apartment with Zenobia," Thaddeus finished. "They know everything, including my regrettable role in our separation. His voice caught unexpectedly. "They're remarkable, Elara. You've raised extraordinary daughters despite impossible circumstances." Something in Elara's expression softened slightly. "They are extraordinary," she agreed, "though I claim only partial credit. Their resilience is innate." "And their compassion," Thaddeus added. "Arietta's first question after learning I was their father was whether they could continue selling flowers to help you and Zenobia." A small, genuine smile touched Elara's lips. "That sounds like her, always the practical caretaker." This momentary connection, founded in shared appreciation of their daughters, felt like the first tentative bridge across the chasm of their past. Elara excused herself to change clothing, returning minutes later transformed by the simple act of wearing ordinary civilian attire, a modest navy dress and comfortable flats that nevertheless restored something essential to her bearing. "Shall we?" Thaddeus gestured toward the exit, carefully maintaining respectful distance as they walked toward the waiting vehicle. The drive from Obsidian Heights into Nova City proper passed largely in silence, both former spouses absorbed in private thoughts as the landscape transitioned from institutional austerity to the gleaming metropolis that had been the backdrop for their relationship's beginning and end. "Octavia?" Elara eventually asked, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. "Gone," Thaddeus replied. She fled Nova City yesterday after I confronted her with evidence of her manipulation. Her accounts have been frozen pending investigation, though. I suspect she maintained offshore resources we haven't yet identified. Elara nodded, unsurprised. She was always meticulous about contingency planning. I underestimated her determination to control the Blackwood legacy, Thaddeus admitted, and her willingness to destroy lives in service of that control. I didn't, Elara said quietly. I recognized her capability for harm from our first meeting. I simply underestimated how thoroughly she could isolate you from the truth. The observation contained no accusation, merely acknowledgement of a painful reality they both now understood. They lapsed into silence again until the vehicle turned into an elegant but unpretentious residential neighborhood, not the exclusive towers where Thaddeus resided, but a tree-lined district of well-maintained apartment buildings with proximity to parks and schools. "This is where you found an apartment?" Elara asked, her surprise evident. "I wanted something comfortable but familiar," Thaddeus explained as they approached a renovated pre-war building with a modest lobby. Close to the girls' school, their friends, the community they know. The transition will be challenging enough, without completely uprooting them. Elara studied him with new assessment. "You've given this considerable thought." "I've had 8 years of thoughtlessness to make up for," Thaddeus replied simply. The elevator carried them to the 4th floor, where Thaddeus led the way to a corner unit. He paused before opening the door. "I've made no assumptions about our relationship," he clarified. "This apartment has sufficient bedrooms for privacy and independence. All arrangements are temporary, contingent entirely on your preferences moving forward." Elara's expression softened marginally at this explicit recognition of her autonomy. "Thank you for understanding that trust requires rebuilding." Thaddeus unlocked the door, stepping aside to allow Elara to enter first. The sound of running footsteps preceded the emotional reunion as Arietta and Lyra burst from the living room, launching themselves toward their mother with cries of joy that transcended language. Elara knelt, gathering both daughters into her arms with a fierce protectiveness that brought unexpected moisture to Thaddeus's eyes. For several minutes, the three remained locked in embrace, whispering reassurances and expressions of love that formed a private universe of reconnection. Zenobia emerged from the kitchen, her stern features softened by evident relief at her friend's return. When she spotted Thaddeus standing respectfully near the entrance, she offered a brief nod of acknowledgement, the closest thing to approval he had yet received from her. Eventually, Elara rose, keeping her daughters close as she surveyed their new surroundings. The apartment was spacious, but not ostentatious, tastefully furnished with comfortable pieces that invited living rather than showcasing wealth. Sunlight streamed through large windows overlooking a neighborhood park where children played on equipment visible from the living room. "We have our own rooms," Arietta announced, clearly having already explored the space. "With real beds, not fold-outs, and bookshelves," Lyra added more quietly. "With space for all our books, not just some." Elara's eyes met Thaddeus's over the girl's excited commentary. "This is very generous," she acknowledged. "It's the minimum owed," he replied simply. "The deed is in your name. No conditions, no expectations." Something in Elara's expression shifted at this statement, not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the first recognition that his intentions extended beyond assuaging guilt. The moment was interrupted as the twins pulled their mother deeper into the apartment, eager to show her every detail of their new home. Zenobia approached Thaddeus, her perpetual wariness temporarily superseded by practical concerns. "My appointment at Nova Medical is in 2 hours," she reminded him, "though I'm reluctant to leave them so soon after reunion." "My driver can return for you," Thaddeus assured her, Family time shouldn't be interrupted for medical appointments that can be rescheduled. Zenobia's assessment of him sharpened. You've arranged for experimental treatment options rarely available to ordinary citizens, she observed, without consultation or permission. I've arranged for all options to be presented, Thaddeus corrected gently. The decisions remain entirely yours, though I hope you'll consider treatments that might extend your time with them. They need you, perhaps now more than ever. The former professor studied him with that penetrating gaze that had likely intimidated generations of students. You're not what I expected, she finally conceded, given Elara's descriptions of your previous preoccupation with corporate matters. I'm not who I was, Thaddeus acknowledged. Though I have considerable distance, yet to travel before becoming who I should be. This honest assessment appeared to satisfy Zenobia temporarily. She moved to join Elara and the twins in their exploration of the apartment, leaving Thaddeus alone with his thoughts. He observed his newly discovered family from a respectful distance, noting how the girls alternated between excited chatter about their new circumstances and physical reassurance that their mother was truly present. Elara maintained contact with them constantly, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing copper hair, small gestures of reconnection after forced separation. Eventually, the initial excitement settled into more practical considerations. Thaddeus offered to order lunch delivery, but Elara surprised him by suggesting they all cook together instead, a family activity that would establish normalcy and participation rather than passive receiving. The resulting meal preparation transformed the kitchen into a scene Thaddeus had never experienced. Arietta measuring ingredients with scientific precision, Lyra arranging vegetables into artistic patterns, Elara guiding their efforts with gentle directions, Zenobia supervising from a chair while resting her limited energy. When Thaddeus hesitantly asked how he might help, the twins assigned him vegetable chopping duties with grave seriousness. Not like that. Arietta corrected his technique with the authority of a master chef addressing an apprentice. Mom says uniform sizes cook more evenly. Thaddeus, who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts and intimidated boardrooms with his presence, found himself humbly accepting instruction from an 8-year-old on the proper method of dicing carrots. The experience was both humbling and strangely fulfilling. As they gathered around the table to enjoy their collaborative creation, Thaddeus observed how naturally the twins incorporated him into conversation, asking his opinion on books they had read, describing their school projects, explaining their flower-selling business model with entrepreneurial enthusiasm. They had accepted his presence with the remarkable adaptability of children, neither completely trusting nor rejecting him outright. Elara remained more guarded, her contributions to conversation measured and primarily focused on the girls. Yet, Thaddeus noticed moments when her expression softened, watching him interact with their daughters, small acknowledgements of his genuine effort to connect. After lunch, when Zenobia departed for her medical appointment with assurances of return, before dinner, Elara finally addressed the practicalities of their unprecedented situation. We should discuss expectations, she said directly once the twins had retreated to explore their new rooms more thoroughly. For all our sakes, but especially the girls. Thaddeus nodded, appreciating her straightforward approach. I have none beyond being permitted to know them and support you all. The nature and extent of that involvement is entirely your decision. They need stability, Elara emphasized, not temporary enthusiasm that fades when the novelty of fatherhood wears thin or when business demands reassert themselves. I understand, Thaddeus acknowledged, which is why I've restructured my role at Blackwood Innovations. I've appointed a new operations executive and reduced my direct involvement to strategic oversight. My primary focus moving forward will be family, not empire building. Elara's surprise was evident. You've stepped back from daily operations. That seems uncharacteristic. As I told Zenobia, I'm not who I was, Thaddeus replied simply. The past 8 years have shown me that success without connection is ultimately hollow. I built Blackwood Tower, but lived alone at its pinnacle. Something in Elara's expression shifted, not quite trust, but perhaps the first hint of belief in his sincerity. The girls have school schedules, activities, routines that provide security. Any involvement you have should enhance rather than disrupt those patterns. I agree completely, Thaddeus said. I'd like to learn those routines, understand their interests, support their existing activities while perhaps introducing new opportunities when appropriate. They continued discussing practical arrangements, financial support structures that respected Elara's independence while ensuring the family's security, educational considerations as the twins progressed through school, medical care for Zenobia's condition, and the gradual integration of Thaddeus into their established family dynamic. Throughout the conversation, Elara maintained her protective maternal stance while demonstrating willingness to consider genuine co-parenting. It was more than Thaddeus had dared hope for in these early hours of reunion. This isn't forgiveness, Elara eventually clarified, echoing her statement from the prison visit. That remains a separate journey. Understood, Thaddeus acknowledged, and not expected, certainly not immediately. Trust must be earned through consistent action, not declared intentions. Before Elara could respond, Lyra appeared in the doorway, holding the constellation necklace that had ultimately led to their reunion. "Mom," she asked tentatively, "now that you're home, should I give this back to you?" Elara's expression softened as she addressed her daughter. "That necklace belongs to Blackwood women," she explained gently. "It's your heritage as much as mine." Lyra considered this, then looked at Thaddeus with that direct amber gaze that never failed to pierce him emotionally. "Is that true? It's a part of being a Blackwood?" "Yes," Thaddeus confirmed, emotion thickening his voice. "My mother gave it to your mother when we married, saying it should belong to the woman who would continue the Blackwood lineage. It represents not just the past, but the future of our family." The simple explanation seemed to satisfy Lyra, who nodded solemnly before returning to her exploration of her new bedroom. After she departed, Elara regarded Thaddeus thoughtfully. "You've already begun thinking of them as Blackwoods," she observed. "They are Blackwoods," Thaddeus replied without hesitation. "If you're amenable, I'd like to make that legally official, not to claim ownership or control, but to ensure they receive all protections and benefits of their birthright." "Including the burdens that accompany the name?" Elara challenged, gently. "Including the responsibility to redefine what that name represents," Thaddeus countered. "The twins already embody values far more meaningful than financial success or social position. Perhaps they're exactly what the Blackwood legacy needs: compassion, resilience, and genuine connection, rather than power and acquisition." This perspective appeared to surprise Elara, who studied him with renewed assessment. Before she could respond, Arietta bounded into the living room, brandishing a tablet. "Father," she addressed Thaddeus with that formal manner that continued to both amuse and move him, "we need supplies for our flower business, better displays, proper wrapping materials, a cart for transport." The direct request, delivered with entrepreneurial confidence rather than childish asking, brought an unexpected smile to Thaddeus's face. "I believe that can be arranged. Perhaps we could visit supplier warehouses tomorrow to select appropriate materials." "Tomorrow is Saturday," Arietta confirmed with approval. "Optimal for business planning. We should establish a budget first. A reasonable approach." Thaddeus agreed seriously, though his eyes conveyed amusement to Elara over their daughter's business acumen. "Would you like to work on projections this evening?" Arietta nodded decisively before returning to her room, presumably to prepare financial documentation. After she departed, Elara's expression held the first genuine smile Thaddeus had witnessed since their reunion. "She's quite determined," Elara noted with maternal pride. "Wonder where she gets that quality," Thaddeus responded, the gentle teasing, tentatively testing boundaries of their evolving relationship. To his relief, Elara accepted the comment with a raised eyebrow rather than withdrawal. Certainly not from any genetics involving stubborn technology executives who refuse to abandon projects others consider impossible. This acknowledgement of their shared contribution to their daughters' personalities represented another small step toward potential reconciliation. The moment was interrupted by Thaddeus's secure phone, signaling an urgent message. "Apologies," he said, checking the screen. "It's Alexandra with updates on legal proceedings." The message confirmed that all charges against Elara had been officially expunged, her professional credentials reinstated, and preliminary investigations into Octavia's interference had uncovered additional evidence of systematic manipulation, extending beyond their family situation into corporate matters. "She violated several securities regulations," Thaddeus explained, after summarizing the findings for Elara. "The corporate aspects will require my attention eventually, though I've instructed Alexandra to prioritize your complete legal rehabilitation first." "My rehabilitation will require more than legal declarations," Elara observed pragmatically. "My professional reputation was destroyed along with my freedom. Employment opportunities will be limited despite official exoneration." Thaddeus considered this reality. What would you want to do if limitations were removed? Return to accounting? Continue your design studies? Something entirely different? The question appeared to surprise Elara, who had clearly grown accustomed to making decisions based on necessity rather than preference. "I haven't allowed myself that kind of thinking in 8 years," she admitted. "Every choice has been directed toward survival and stability for the girls. Perhaps that can change." "Now," Thaddeus suggested carefully, "not to diminish your independence, but to expand possibilities." Before Elara could respond, Zenobia returned from her medical appointment, her expression reflecting cautious optimism that transformed the conversation toward treatment options, potential outcomes, and practical support arrangements. The remainder of the day unfolded with the natural rhythms of family life: homework supervision, dinner preparation, evening routines that Thaddeus observed with respectful attention, integrating himself gradually rather than imposing presence. When the twins finally settled for sleep in their new bedrooms, a process that required multiple reassurances that their mother would indeed still be present when they awoke, the adults gathered in the living room for more substantive discussion of future arrangements. "The treatment protocol is promising," Zenobia reported, her academic precision intact despite discussing her own prognosis. "Experimental, but showing significant efficacy in cases similar to mine. Without your intervention," she acknowledged with a nod toward Thaddeus, "it would have remained inaccessible." "Will you be well enough to continue living independently?" Elara asked, practical concerns evident beneath her compassion. "Eventually, perhaps," Zenobia conceded. "The initial treatment phases require significant physical recovery periods. I had planned to investigate assisted living facilities, though the costs are prohibitive." "You'll stay here," Elara stated definitively. "The 4th bedroom is yours. For as long as necessary, the girls need you in their lives, and frankly, so do I." The straightforward inclusion of her mentor in their family unit demonstrated Elara's capacity for loyalty and compassion, qualities that had initially attracted Thaddeus during their courtship, before ambition and manipulation had corrupted his recognition of their value. "I've established a medical trust," Thaddeus added, covering all treatment expenses and home care assistance as needed, structured as an independent foundation rather than direct payment to preserve autonomy. Zenobia assessed him with characteristic directness. "You're learning," she observed cryptically before excusing herself to rest, the day's activities having depleted her limited energy reserves. After her departure, Thaddeus and Elara found themselves alone for the first time since the morning's prison release. The silence between them carried the weight of shared history, recent revelations, and uncertain future. "I should go," Thaddeus finally said, respecting boundaries while reluctant to leave this newfound family connection. "You need time to settle, to re-establish normalcy with the girls." Elara nodded, though something in her expression had softened throughout the day's interactions. "They've asked if you'll join us for breakfast tomorrow before flower shopping. Apparently, your vegetable chopping skills require further refinement." The gentle teasing, reminiscent of their early relationship, caught Thaddeus unexpectedly. "I'm a willing student," he responded, matching her tone. Though technology executives rarely receive culinary feedback from 8-year-olds. "Perhaps more should," Elara suggested, walking him to the door. "It might improve both their cooking and their perspective." At the threshold, Thaddeus paused. "This isn't how I imagined today unfolding," he admitted. "I expected justified anger, perhaps outright rejection." "Those emotions aren't absent," Elara clarified, "but they serve no purpose for the girls. They need parents focused on their well-being, not distracted by past grievances." "You're remarkable," Thaddeus said simply, "to prioritize their needs above justified resentment. I hope someday to demonstrate similar grace." Something in Elara's expression shifted. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the first tentative step toward it. 8 o'clock tomorrow, she reminded him. "Arietta expects punctuality for business planning." With that gentle dismissal, their first day of reunification concluded, leaving Thaddeus to return temporarily to his empty penthouse with renewed awareness of all he had nearly lost forever. 6 months later, Nova City sparkled with spring sunshine as Thaddeus assisted the twins with their flower cart in Renaissance Park. The operation had evolved considerably since those initial street corner sales, now featuring a proper mobile, a kiosk, professional signage, and arrangements created with flowers sourced from ethical urban greenhouses rather than discount outlets. "Customer approaching Northern Quadrant," Arietta announced with characteristic precision, having adopted the terminology from Thaddeus's business operations. Lyra, whose artistic talents had flourished with proper materials and encouragement, made final adjustments to a centerpiece featuring native Nova species arranged in a constellation pattern that had become their signature design. Perfect positioning, Thaddeus approved, having learned to match his daughter's formal business demeanor during what they solemnly called operational hours. Their weekend flower business had become a family tradition, with Elara managing financial records, Zenobia, whose experimental treatments had yielded promising initial results, providing botanical expertise, and Thaddeus handling logistics and transportation. The profits, modest but steady, were divided between the Girls' Education Fund and donations to family support programs at women's shelters. The past 6 months had witnessed remarkable transformations across multiple dimensions of their lives. The twins had blossomed academically and socially with the security of stable family support. Zenobia had responded positively to treatments previously inaccessible to her. Elara had established a promising design consultancy specializing in sustainable urban spaces, combining her financial acumen with her long-standing interest in environmental harmony. Thaddeus himself had undergone perhaps the most profound changes, His role at Blackwood Innovations had evolved from controlling executive to guiding visionary, allowing him to redirect the corporation's considerable resources toward projects with meaningful social impact while maintaining profitability. His personal priorities had shifted entirely. Corporate negotiations scheduled around school presentations, development meetings adjusted to accommodate family dinners, acquisition, strategies considered through the lens of what world his daughters would ultimately inherit. Most significantly, his relationship with Elara had gradually evolved from cautious co-parenting to tentative friendship, to something approaching their original connection, rebuilt slowly on foundations of mutual respect and shared purpose rather than the passionate but ultimately vulnerable attachment of their first attempt. They had not rushed this reconstruction. Thaddeus had maintained his separate residence while spending increasing time at the family apartment, allowing Elara and the twins to determine the pace of integration. Trust had been rebuilt through consistent presence, reliable support, and respectful boundaries. Today marked another milestone in their journey. After the flower market concluded, they would host a small gathering celebrating Elara's design firm's first major commission, the transformation of an abandoned industrial complex into a combined educational facility and community green space, funded by the Blackwood Foundation, but executed entirely under her independent vision. As Thaddeus assisted a customer with their purchase, he observed Elara approaching from across the park, her copper hair catching sunlight as she navigated morning crowds. The sight still affected him profoundly. Gratitude for second chances, appreciation for her grace throughout their complicated journey, and renewed recognition of the connection that had initially drawn them together before ambition and manipulation had intervened. "Successful morning?" she asked, joining them at the kiosk. 17 sales, 15% increase over last week, Arietta reported promptly. 3 custom orders for next weekend, Lyra added more quietly, including 1 for Dr. Vaughan's retirement ceremony. Impressive statistics, Elara approved, her smile holding warmth that had gradually returned through months of healing. Perhaps we should conclude operations slightly early today, given our afternoon plans? The twins exchanged their characteristic, silent communication before agreeing, their entrepreneurial rigor balanced by growing excitement for the celebration ahead. As they began the methodical process of closing their operation for the day, Thaddeus found himself momentarily overcome by the ordinary perfection of the scene, his family working together in simple harmony, their individual strengths complementing each other's contributions. Later, as guests mingled in the apartment that had become a genuine home, Thaddeus observed the evidence of their collective transformation. Zenobia engaged in animated discussion with medical researchers whose work she now advised through a foundation position. The twins guided visitors through an exhibition of Lyra's botanical illustrations, paired with Arietta's meticulous data visualizations of their business growth. Colleagues from Elara's emerging design firm reviewed project renderings with representatives from educational institutions interested in similar installations. Most significantly, Elara herself moved through the gathering with confident ease. Her professional identity reclaimed and expanded, her personal relationships strengthened through adversity, overcome rather than denied. When she joined Thaddeus on the balcony overlooking the park, where their flower business operated weekends, her expression held contentment that had seemed impossible during those early days of cautious reunion. "Quite different from our last corporate celebration," she observed, referencing the formal galas that had characterized their previous shared life. "Considerably improved," Thaddeus agreed, noting the genuine connections evident among guests, rather than the strategic networking that had dominated their former social events. Elara studied him with the directness that had always characterized her approach. "You've changed fundamentally," she assessed. Not just in priorities, but in perspective. Necessary evolution, Thaddeus acknowledged, though incomplete. I'm still learning what truly matters. Aren't we all? Elara replied, her gaze shifting to where their daughters were earnestly explaining their business model to amused adult listeners. They stood in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching, as they observed the gathering. The physical proximity represented another step in their gradually reconstructed relationship, casual contact no longer fraught with unresolved history. I received final confirmation today, Elara said after a moment. All professional certifications reinstated, employment records amended to show continuous status rather than interruption. My professional rehabilitation is officially complete. Overdue justice, Thaddeus noted, though inadequate compensation for what was taken. Some losses can't be recovered, Elara agreed, but perhaps they can be balanced by new gains. There's a beep-teep-teep. Her gaze returned to their daughters, whose identical features framed expressions of individual personality. Arietta's analytical confidence, Lyra's artistic sensitivity. I've been considering your invitation, she continued after another comfortable silence, referencing Thaddeus's tentative suggestion from the previous month that they consider formalizing his integration into their daily family life. Moving forward would require addressing unresolved history directly, rather than merely working around it. I welcome that conversation, Thaddeus replied carefully, whenever and however you prefer. Elara's expression held both caution and possibility. The girls have asked when you'll officially live with us, rather than maintaining two residences. They're practical enough to recognize the inefficiency. Thaddeus smiled at this characterization. Arietta attempted to present me with a spreadsheet, demonstrating the financial advantages of consolidation. That sounds like her, Elara acknowledged with maternal pride, though emotions rarely conform to spreadsheet analysis. True, Thaddeus agreed, which is why I've respected your pace throughout this process. The future of our family, in whatever configuration, depends entirely on genuine healing, not convenient arrangements. Elara studied him with renewed assessment. The Thaddeus Blackwood I married would have presented logical arguments rather than acknowledging emotional complexity. The Thaddeus Blackwood you married was an incomplete person, he acknowledged, capable in business but untrained in what truly sustains human connection. Their conversation paused as the twins approached, eager to show their mother a particularly enthusiastic review of her design concepts from an influential urban development journal. When they departed again, Elara turned back to Thaddeus with unexpected decisiveness. I'd like to try, she said simply, not because of convenience or practicality or even the girls' preferences, though those factors matter, but because these months have shown me glimpses of the person I originally fell in love with, enhanced rather than diminished by experience. The declaration, understated but profound in its implications, momentarily rendered Thaddeus speechless. Are you certain? He finally managed. I wouldn't want rushed decisions based on temporary circumstances. Nothing about our journey has been rushed, Elara observed with gentle irony. 8 years separated, 6 months rebuilding. I believe we've earned the right to cautious optimism. Before Thaddeus could respond, Arietta summoned them to witness Lyra's presentation of a commemorative flower arrangement for Elara's professional achievement. The moment of personal revelation necessarily yielded to family celebration, though the significance remained between them like a newly planted seed, requiring nurture rather than immediate harvest. Later that evening, after guests departed and the twins finally surrendered to sleep following the day's excitement, Thaddeus and Elara found themselves alone in the living room that had witnessed their gradual reconnection over months of family dinners, homework supervision, and careful conversation. "I should go," Thaddeus said automatically, respecting the established boundaries of their arrangement. "Or you could stay," Elara suggested quietly. "Not permanently, not yet, but perhaps as a beginning." The invitation represented another threshold crossed in their careful reconstruction. Not dramatic reunion, but deliberate choice to move forward together rather than apart. As they sat together discussing possibilities rather than past mistakes, Thaddeus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The chance encounter with twin girls selling a carousel horse on a street corner had initiated a profound transformation. From isolated success to connected purpose, from corporate achievement to family foundation, from hollow victory to meaningful connection. The carousel horse itself now occupied a place of honor in the twins' shared study space, its delicate craftsmanship a reminder of heritage worth preserving, while its history demonstrated resilience worth celebrating. "If it goes back where it belongs, wishes come true," Arietta had told him during that first meeting. The toy had indeed returned home, and with it, the family connection that represented Thaddeus Blackwood's most significant second chance and greatest ongoing responsibility. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.